No, I cannot submit it in writing. Yes, I am sleepy and tired. But this bill is very important. And there's a whole lot that's in this bill. I'm not going to focus on all the amendments that we dealt with. There's only one section for me that would cause me to speak at 1:45, and that's the public finance section. We are making choices. We're setting priorities. In HB 1, the Texas House made a choice, and we made a choice of cutting $4 billion out of public education. That was a choice that we made. In 2006, we made a promise to the local school districts. We are breaking that promise today. 2011, we're making another promise that we'll fix this system, and I don't think there's any assurance that we're going to fix it unless we are forced to do it. Now, one of the things that I noticed today, I noticed all day, especially on the school finance portion, is that after we made the decision, Mr. Speaker, can I get a little order at 1:45? Thank you. For those who voted to make the $4 billion cuts to public education, today what I noticed is that there were a number of people scrambling on this floor to try to minimize the cuts to your respective districts. It's amazing we voted some of you voted to make the $4 billion cuts, but many of those who voted to take the $4 billion cuts did not want to accept them for their local school districts. I found that fascinating today all day long. And so you were trying to decide whether or not the Isla proposal would minimize your cuts, whether the Shapiro proposal would minimize your cuts. The bottom line is that you voted to cut $4 billion, and you need to take ownership of your cuts. There are no local school districts that are winners in this bill. There are no winners. I want to be clear. And that's why I will speak at 1:45, because we're talking about the 4.9 million school kids in the state of Texas. There are no winners. And this body made the choice. Now, you said we don't have the money. Not going to accept that. I hope the people in the state of Texas don't accept that either. You voted to take $4 billion away. You voted to reduce every local school district in the state of Texas. And today you scramble on the House floor to minimize the cuts to your district for the votes that you made. You made choices. Choices have consequences. Today in Senate Bill 1, you are reaping the consequences of your actions. And so when we leave here, the only thing that we did today was to have losers and those who will lose a little less or will lose a little bit more. But every school district, every school child in the state of Texas will be affected by the decisions that the Texas House made. Representative King, you talked earlier when we were talking about the gas rigs, that there were gas rigs that would either be closed or they wouldn't be opening up. Let me tell you about the consequences of Senate Bill 1 on school finance. In my district, whether it's Houston Independent School District or Aldine, they are closing and consolidating schools. Let me tell you what's worse than a rig that's closing. A neighborhood school that's closing or consolidated, or in Aldine, magnet school programs that are being removed. The worst thing is to drive by a school, a neighborhood school, Representative Riddle, and it is boarded up. And in this bill, Senate Bill 1, it's not about rigs. It will be local neighborhood schools that will, in many cases, be closed, consolidated, or programs closed. And the reality is, it won't just happen in my district. Schools in rural Texas will be affected. Urban and suburban will all be affected. That's the sad part about it. Now, you all said, and Representative Eisler said earlier, education should be the number one priority. We are dealing with it at the last hour, 10 till 2 in the morning. Senate Bill 1 does not make education the number one priority. In HB 1, we funded in part Medicaid, $4.8 billion. But Dr. Zerwas, every one of those people are entitled in Health and Human Services on Medicaid, $4.8 billion. We are not paying it right now, but we will pay it later. But it will be funded. For roads and bridges, in HB 1, you all took out a $3 billion loan to make sure that the roads and bridges and all those contracts will be let. We took care of that. But when it comes to our schools and our school children, you've taken $4 billion away. In the history of this state, the Texas House has always made education a number one priority. I have been here, Speaker Craddock, I have been here when I have literally seen the leadership send back the budget because we were spending more in Health and Human Services and not enough in education. I have literally seen where we have held up the budget to make sure that education was appropriately funded. I don't know what's happening, that all of a sudden now we are not willing to invest in education. I don't know what's going on. I don't know what's happening. Maybe we're looking at the schools and we don't like what we see. Maybe there's a reason why we have decided not to invest like we used to in public education. But my grandmother used to always say, if you aim at one, you're going to hit the other. And you can't get at one without getting at the other. Rural Texas, suburban Texas, urban Texas will all be affected. And lastly, in all of this conversation about school finance, have you noticed we didn't say anything about performance? We have not even talked about outcomes. We have not said anything about making sure that our kids were educated. Not one single discussion about the quality of education and making sure that our kids are ready to move forward. You cannot leave the Texas House today, this morning, and head when the special session is over and start campaigning and say that education is your number one priority. You cannot, now you may try to say that, but my pastor many times in his sermon says, if you want to know where people's priorities are, ask them to pull out their checkbook and look at the balance sheet, and you will be able to identify people's priorities. When you pull out the appropriations bill, education is not at the top of your list. It has fallen from the priority list. And the only way you can get it back and save the schools in rural Texas, urban and suburban, is to vote no to Senate Bill 1. I don't like being in a special. Don't want to be here tomorrow or next week. But for the children in the state of Texas, I don't care if I'm here all summer. Better to get it right than not at all. Lastly, to those who may be watching via the internet, the people in the state of Texas must have the final say. If the people like us cutting $4 billion away, closing and consolidating schools, eliminating magnet programs, then they will give you an affirmative vote when you leave here. But if parents don't like what we have done, If teachers, if they're not upset tonight, they'll certainly be upset tomorrow. If teachers don't like it, if educators don't like it, if the business community does not like it, they must have the final say. And if they do not, when we come back again, for those of us who come back, when you come back again, it is what it is. I simply believe, as I heard some voices in D.C. in Congress saying about a year ago, the people don't like it, you're not listening to the people, and the people will respond. The Texas House on School Finance and Education is not listening to the people, not listening to our constituents, and in the end, the people in the state of Texas must have the final say. And I hope they will speak loud and clear that the direction in which we have taken is the wrong direction for the future of the state of Texas. They must speak, and they must speak loud and clear. And I hope they will do it in a democratic process where we will all know that we did not listen, and they will hold us accountable for reducing education from the number one priority to dealing with it at the very end of an appropriation process. I shall vote no.